Welcome back to Quiz Genius. Let's test your brain with 50 fun fruit trivia questions. Before we start, please subscribe to the Quiz Genius channel. Let's start. Which fruit has its seeds on the outside? Strawberry. Which fruit is known as the king of fruits? Durian. Which fruit floats because it's 25% air? Apple. Which fruit contains the enzyme bromelain? Pineapple. Which fruit has varieties called Cavendish and Gros Michel? Banana. Which fruit was the first to be eaten on the moon? Peach. Which fruit is the most consumed worldwide? Banana. Which fruit's name comes from the Latin word for seeded apple? Pomegranate. Which fruit is known to help with digestion due to its fiber and enzyme content? Papaya. Which fruit grows on a cactus? Dragon fruit. Which fruit has more vitamin C than an orange? Kiwi. Which fruit is called butter fruit in some places? Avocado. Which fruit was once called a love apple? Tomato. Which fruit has no fat, sodium, or cholesterol and is 92% water? Watermelon. Which small fruit is often mistaken for a berry but isn't one botanically? Raspberry. Which fruit can be red, green, or purple? Grapes. Which fruit is used to make guacamole? Avocado. Which tropical fruit has a spiky outer shell and yellow inside? Pineapple. Which fruit is known for its fuzzy skin? Kiwi. Which fruit is usually dried to make raisins? Grapes. Which fruit is called nature's candy when dried? Dates. Which citrus fruit has both sweet and sour varieties? Lemon. Which fruit has a stone or pit in the middle? Peach. Which fruit is star-shaped when cut crosswise? Star fruit. Which fruit has tiny edible seeds inside a red juicy shell? Pomegranate. Which fruit is a cross between a pomelo and an orange? Grapefruit. Which fruit has varieties called Honeycrisp and Granny Smith? Apple. Which fruit comes from the fig tree? Fig. Which fruit has a red skin and white flesh with black seeds? Dragon fruit. Which fruit has a strong smell and spiky shell? Durian. Which fruit is often sliced and put on pizza? Pineapple. Which fruit can be yellow or red and grows in bunch? Banana. Which fruit is shaped like a teardrop and has a gritty texture? Pear. Which fruit is used to make cider? Apple. Which fruit is the main ingredient in wine? Grapes. Which fruit is commonly found in tropical smoothies? Mango. Which fruit is often used in making jelly and jam? Strawberry. Which fruit has a high level of potassium? Banana. Which fruit has an oval shape and fuzzy brown skin? Kiwi. Which fruit is dried to make prunes? Plum. Which fruit has a crown on top? Pineapple. Which fruit is known for its sour flavor and is often used in cleaning products? Lemon. Which fruit contains natural oils in its peel used in perfumes? Orange. Which fruit is a good source of lycopene? Tomato. Which fruit has a smooth pit inside and is often eaten fresh or dried? Apricot. Which fruit is commonly paired with chocolate in desserts? Strawberry. Which fruit is often used in fall desserts like pies and crisps? Apple. Which fruit has a tropical flavor and orange flesh? Papaya. Which fruit can be dried and rolled into fruit leather? Mango. Which fruit grows on a vine and can be green or purple? Grapes. Pick your next challenge and hit like and subscribe.